You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan. This week's guests comprise a very interesting trio indeed. We start with a financial expert who has devised a practical strategy to help get more women onto company boards, which not only changes the boys' culture, but it's proven more profitable for the companies. Then Nina Khrushcheva returns to the program, the Russian scholar and expert who dares have a feminist analysis of Putin, and she will tell us if we're heading into another Cold War or not. Last, the Texas legislator who filibustered for women's reproductive rights, wearing the now famous pink running shoes. Well, she's still running, this time for governor of Texas, and she's written a book more honest than most politicians would even contemplate. Wendy Davis. What a guest lineup. But first, we need to look inside the headlines. There's a whole lot of people who would really like the dust to settle on the case of NFL running back Ray Rice having punched his fiancée, now his wife Janae, insensible, and the subsequent NFL scandal that ensued because, of course, as you will remember, although she was blamed, the wife, for being drunk for 3 months, and only half the videotape that was shot in an elevator in an Atlantic City hotel was shown, it turned out that there was a full videotape that showed him punching her with a vicious left hook. Guess what? The Atlantic City Police, the NFL, and the Baltimore Ravens all had the full tape and didn't act on it. Well, here is what the NFL made its fans collaborators with. 25% of women will be involved in domestic abuse. 1 in 3 women who are murdered are more likely to be murdered by their partner. 3 million children a year see abuse in their own homes. 1 in 4 people end up homeless because of domestic violence. One positive side effect of this was that 16 female senators from both sides of the aisle called on the NFL to adopt a zero-tolerance policy on domestic violence. And they were very concerned that a new policy, Commissioner Roger Goodell announced, that would now let a player commit a violent act and return to the field after not just a 2-game suspension, but a 6-game suspension. Oh, wow. The senators said, if you violently assault a woman, you shouldn't get a second chance to play football in the NFL, period, full stop. Another positive side effect was the creation of 2 hashtags, hashtag why I stayed and hashtag why I left, both set up by survivors on Twitter, both incredibly moving, and both revealing as to why Janae is not talking, because all too often the victim herself is dependent emotionally and financially on the perpetrator. Violent domestic assaults rarely lead to jail time or to serious legal consequences, especially when it's a first-time offense, and a double especially when it's a celebrity. The first-time offense thing is specious because we know that the repeat rate is high. The number of criminal domestic attacks has fallen by 2/3 since the Federal Violence Against Women Act became law 2 decades ago, but there's been an erosion of support for victims. In 2000, the Supreme Court struck down a provision of the law that allowed victims to sue their abusers in federal court. About 1/3 of all states have refused to enact legislation that would forbid perpetrators of domestic violence to own firearms. Yeah. In South Carolina, where lawmakers have resisted efforts to strengthen penalties for domestic abuse, a local newspaper examined the, as they called it, epidemic of spousal homicide this year and reported that the state had more than twice as many shelters for animals as for abused women. All over the country, courts tend to steer domestic violence cases into counseling. In sports, they just, hey, let them play. Example, Brett Myers, pitcher for the Philadelphia Phillies, charged with assaulting his wife in 2006. Phillies put him on the mound as their starting pitcher 36 hours later. Goaltender Semyon Varlamov of the National Hockey League was arrested after his girlfriend said he kicked her to the floor and stomped on her chest. He spent the night in jail and was back in goal the next game. Defensive lineman Ray McDonald of the San Francisco 49ers was arrested after an altercation with his pregnant fiancée, who the police said had visible serious injuries. But he started in the 49ers' season-opening victory game. It's fairly common for athletes to be involved in domestic abuse cases, but rare that they face meaningful punishment from their employers. The teams and the leagues generally hide behind a presumption of innocence, saying that they don't want to get ahead of the legal process. Now, not getting ahead of the legal process means that they do have access to their own disciplinary actions, but those mostly amount to clinical evaluation, maybe counseling, maybe a suspension of pay for a few games, maybe a suspension of play for a few games. USA Today maintains a database of arrests, charges, and citations of NFL players for anything more serious than a traffic violation. It goes back to the year 2000 and covers to date 713 incidents in which pro football players have had a run-in with the law that was reported by the news media. So here are some of the revealing facts. One NFL player in 40 is arrested in a given year. The most common accusation is driving while drunk, but domestic violence is coming in a close second and a huge problem, with 85 charges for it and related offenses since the year 2000. This is interesting. The frequency of arrests in a franchise tends to be consistent over time. The Minnesota Vikings and the Cincinnati Bengals ranked the worst. And speaking of the Minnesota Vikings, their star running back has just been recently charged with child abuse for having switched his 4-year-old little boy, bloody, with a tree branch so that there were gashes in the child's flesh. Peterson smiled for his mugshot and said you didn't see anything wrong with this. This is how he was raised and disciplined when he was a child in Texas. Well, in the meanwhile, guess what happened in South Africa? A judge found Oscar Pistorius not guilty of murder of his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp, whom he shot and admitted shooting 4 times, mistaking her for an intruder. He was found guilty of something called culpable homicide. You know, a woman who is killed is most likely anywhere in the world to be killed by a man. A man who is killed anywhere in the world is most likely, on the other hand, to be killed by a man. The abuse of Janae Rice and the death of Riva Steenkamp make the ghost of Nicole Brown Simpson rise and walk. Steenkamp herself wrote messages to Pistorius saying, "I'm so scared of you sometimes, and how you snap at me and how you react to me." She was scared of how jealous he was, how controlling. She felt attacked, she wrote, by the person she deserved protection from. Well, within minutes of the verdict, South Africa's Paralympic Committee issued a statement that if Pistorius wishes to resume his athletics career, then we wouldn't step in his way. Close quote. Rice, Pistorius, all of these guys are simply too lucrative for the sports industry to lose simply because women's blood is on the floor. So how do we change this? Well, I think we hit them in their purses, because that's all the owners care about. Braun Shavers, Ford Motor Company, Anheuser-Busch, Ameritrade, Procter & Gamble, General Motors. These and other companies are sponsors of the NFL. You can find them easily enough by simply Googling sponsors for the NFL. What if we wrote to each of these companies, making it clear that we will boycott all their products until they either stop sponsoring the NFL or until the NFL changes its policy to one of zero tolerance on harming women and children? While we're at it, we can write to our congressional representatives protesting the fact that the NFL, despite the billions of dollars that flows into its coffers every year, is tax exempt. Or didn't you know that? Yes, it's registered as a non-profit. There'll be more on this at the end of the program, but in the meanwhile, think about letting them know that this is not our idea of fun and games. And now for our first guest. Eve Ellis is a financial advisor, and she is a senior partner in the Matterhorn Group at Morgan Stanley. She's also portfolio manager of 2 actively managed investment portfolios for those investors who are looking for financial and social returns. The one we want to talk about particularly today is the Parity Portfolio Strategy, the Gender Lens Portfolio. She's also active in numerous organizations, including the Ms. Foundation for Women, Jewish Women's Archive, 2020 Women on Boards, the 30% Coalition, and the 30% Club, all of which aim to get women more visible and powerful in the world of finance. Welcome to Women's Media Center Live, Eve.
Thank you, Robin.
Well, this is an unusual conversation for me because I'm always Alice in financial land. I'm a complete ignoramus where fiscal things are concerned. I don't, I confess, own any stock. I never have. Partly because as a freelance writer, you're never in a financial state to do so, and partly as a radical in the early days, it just seems something I was not going to corrupt myself with, running dogs of a capital imperialist swine. However, as time has gone on, it's become very important to me that wherever there are structures that impact heavily on our lives, I want women in there, and principled women, not just any old women. And you definitely fit that category as the portfolio manager of not just 1, but 2 actively managed investment portfolios for investors that seek financial and social returns to do well and do good. And one is the Matterhorn Group Global Sustainability Portfolio Strategy, which is nice because we'd like to have a planet that sticks around. And the other, which is dear to my heart, is the Parity Portfolio Strategy, a gender lens portfolio. Tell me and my listeners how that came to be, how you devised that.
Over the years, I've been reading an extensive body of research that points to a strong correlation between significant female representation in a company's boardroom and company financial strength. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you want statistics, but briefly, companies with more women on their boards have stronger financials. Mm-hmm. Would you like any statistics?
Oh, one or two are always great. Hit us with statistics.
Well, according to Catalyst, public companies with 3 or more women on their boards have a 46% higher return on equity, a 60% higher return on invested capital, and an 84% higher return on sales.
Yeah.
So I am primarily a wealth manager as well as a portfolio manager, and not surprisingly, like me, my clients are people and nonprofit groups and institutions who prefer to invest with their values. Mm-hmm. So the Parity Portfolio was a logical step for them and for me to use capital to support companies that utilize women's talents on their boards. So the Parity Portfolio is for investors who want to make money and at the same time want to move the needle toward gender fairness.
Didn't Norway even come in with a quota system for women on boards? And
yeah,
and the European Union has got steadily behind that as well.
Yes, and in this country, only 16.9% of board members of S&P 500 companies are women. So that's only 16.9% of the largest companies in this country. So this is even though, as you know, the majority of college degrees, graduate degrees, and PhDs are earned by women.
Yeah.
So this is simply a number that needs to be changed and that is unacceptable.
Yeah, and it's one reason why the financial world and the business community is, I think, the way it is with some of its policies, because we do know that when women get, not as tokens, not as 1 or 2 here or there, but when even not even representative numbers, but better numbers, and then once we actually achieve parity, we govern differently, we We carry our values with us. It would change the values of the financial world. This is just me talking, but I would imagine, I'd strongly bet on the fact that policies about environmentalism, about that impact on children, that impact on just more humane ways of living on the planet, would become financial values once there were women in those positions.
Right, and I think you hit the nail on the head that really one woman is a token.
Yeah.
Two women in a boardroom, I'm using the example of in a boardroom, logically.
Mm-hmm.
Two women in a boardroom, there's a conversation. But apparently when three or more women are in a boardroom, real discussion occurs. And so in the parity portfolio, we invest only in companies that have a minimum of 3 women on their boards. But I don't want you to think it's simply a list of companies with 3 or more women and that's it. My partner, Nikolai Jabankov, and I invest only in companies that withstand our rigorous financial analysis as well. That's critical to us.
Sure. Well, because you want to prove both points.
We are encouraged by our strong financial returns. I'm not at liberty to state performance numbers, but we're approaching our 2-year anniversary, and we are encouraged by the financial returns of the portfolio. But then we also have our social return agenda as well.
And what's that one?
So we have a 2-pronged strategy for social impact. One is to deal with companies one by one, to urge them to recruit women for their boards. Mm-hmm. And the other strategy is to alert the public to this pressing issue that we need more women on boards in corporate America.
Aha. And if people own stock in a company, if listeners own stock in a company, does it make a difference if they drop a line to the company and say, hello, I'm a stockholder and I vote and I want to know, or maybe they can get that from the website. I see that there are no women or only one token woman on your board, and I want that to change. Does that have any impact, or is it ho-hum?
No, I absolutely believe that board members listen to shareholders. Obviously they should, but I really do believe that they do. Mm-hmm. So I think that's a helpful thing to do. I also, one of our investors is a man who said to me recently, this is the first time I'm not being a passive investor. Oh. So by investing in parity, he sees that his investment is part of a larger conversation in this movement to get more women on boards in our country.
That's wonderful. In other words, what you're doing in a sense is positioning an investment also as a vote.
Yes.
It's a vote for values. It's a vote for clean air. It's a vote for women's voices being heard. It's a form of voting, and it's to make it more diverse is in fact to take voting out of. I'm saying this. You don't have to, because I'm sure so many of your clients are pale males, but take voting out of the hegemony, the total possession of pale males, so that financial powers would actually begin to reflect people's investment and stakeholding in the finances of their own society. And that can only be a good thing.
Of course, and good for the company. I mean, really good for the company financially. If the numbers are there, I mean, the research supports it, so it makes sense for the companies to take a look at the diversity on their boards. I mean, these are the people with the fiduciary responsibility, so they can start with the top and make it more diverse.
What's the hardest part, Eve? Is it convincing them that this is a good idea, even though it's so common sense? I mean, I know that now there's a growing sort of movement about this. There's the 100 Women in Hedge Funds Philanthropy Committee. There's the 30% Coalition and the 30% Club and 2020 Women on Boards. So this is an idea whose time has come. Do you find much resistance? Any? Some? What in general?
I think some don't realize that there is a strong pipeline of board-ready women. And they need to look. I mean, women need to lean in, and indeed are leaning in, but male board members need to move over. Mm-hmm. So there really is a strong pipeline of board-ready women, and men and others need to open their eyes and recruit and realize that they're there.
And companies know where this pipeline is? It's not a secret?
It's not a secret.
So people in the financial world would know where to look. In other words, the days of their saying, well, we would, but we can't find any qualified women.
If they have questions, I can definitely point them to the right recruiting firms.
No excuses.
There are absolutely no excuses.
This is terrific.
Not in 2014.
Well, there shouldn't be. This is wonderful. And you picked 3 because 3 is sort of the tipping point.
Exactly. 3 is the tipping point according to the research.
Wow. Well, we're going to have to go. I wish we could talk longer, but this is very important work that you're doing, and I thank you for it. I know you were also a former professional tennis player.
I guess I like to compete, and I'd like to move that number from 16.9% to equality. And it may take a while, but we need to be patient, but we will get there.
Well, we wouldn't get anywhere without people like you starting it. And I commend Morgan Stanley also and the Matterhorn group at Morgan Stanley for getting behind this and letting this happen. They should be very, very proud of you and grateful that somebody with this much pizzazz and chutzpah and vision, not only for the people of women, but for the companies that you work with, is part of their company. So congrats all around, and thank you, Eve, for what you're doing.
Well, Robin, I have admired you and your work for years, so thank you.
We have to take a short break here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and I'll be right back with Nina Khrushcheva, who's going to tell us what really makes Vladimir Putin tick. Don't go away.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome back. Nina L. Khrushcheva is Professor of International Affairs at New School University in New York. She's a member of the Council on Foreign Relations. She's written for Newsweek, the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and many other publications, and her books include Imagining Nabokov, Russia Between Art and Politics, and The Last Khrushchev, a journey into the gulag of the Russian mind. She is the great-granddaughter of Nikita Khrushchev, and she's with us today. Nina Khrushcheva, welcome back to Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you very much.
Let's start with the rather weird, unfortunately not uncommon, but nonetheless bizarre preoccupation with manhood that Vladimir Putin appears to have. All that bare-chested wrestling with tigers and rafting places and shooting off guns and manhood and invading other people's countries is part of the problem too. Do we know much or anything about his childhood, his upbringing, what made him that way before he was KGB?
Well, we do. I mean, what he is really portraying or has been trying to portray, he's a James Bond of contemporary Russia, because we know James Bond walks around bare-chested and does all these great exploits, and he's a spy. So that's a new category of supposedly a Russian leader. That's what he's aspiring to, maybe consciously, subconsciously, I'm not entirely sure, but here we are. And we do know a lot about his background. He actually, before he first became president in 2000, a presidential memoir was released, so to speak, presidential memoir, where he talks to journalists about his book. And every answer, I believe, whatever we're experiencing with Putin today, could be found in that book. It's a very honest book for a PR book. He basically told us everything.
Really?
He was very, he grew up with his mother, and his mother was very important in his life, which is good for him. On the outskirts of St. Petersburg, he was sort of a hooligan, which he's very proud of. And often leaders, particularly Soviet-type leaders, Russian leaders, are very proud of their hooligan
origins. Interesting.
Right, origins as children, precisely because they try to say we were against the grain, we were against the system.
I see.
So he does that, and he sort of portrays himself in the book as a defender of the weak and the small and whatnot. Another thing that we need to remember is, people choose sports for various reasons, sports. We don't think about it, but in pop culture, it's important what kind of sports the country plays or people play.
Absolutely.
He's a judo master. He's a judo master.
I see.
He is the guy who looks for other weaknesses. It's not about his own strength. It's about how you can play out on other weaknesses.
That's right.
From then, we can move on to KGB because his job as a KGB man, he was spy, sort of clandestine operation person in East Germany. His job was to find other people's weaknesses, to be a recruiter. So he's very good at reading the audiences, and originally he was trained as a judo master to do just that. He's a very big fan of movies. He was a very big fan of Soviet spy movies because that was the dream that he had. We have to remember he's a short man, so he needs to compensate for that. He had to become a hero, despite his sort of slight.
So he's really in love with the glamorization of and the eroticism of power.
Absolutely, and that whole spyhood. In fact, in that book that was published in 1999 and I think in 2000 in the United States called First Person, he does talk about the fact that the spy job is beyond wonderful because it can do what the whole army cannot do. And that's exactly what we've been seeing in Ukraine, is that these little incursions, that sort of spy-like incursions, but not an invasion, nobody can call it an invasion, is exactly what he already laid out as early as 1999.
I see. Fascinating. Back up for just a moment. Where was the father in all this? Had he abandoned them, or was he a presence, or what?
Well, there was various versions of that, of the father. The father was a World War hero, and so Putin says, but it was pretty much of a fatherless childhood, and that's another that sort of goes to the question of where women are in Russia, is that a lot of them are mothers. Fathers are not seen. Fathers are not known. Even if they're present, they are not present because there's sort of these mythological figures that run and carry forward that patriarchal country. They're almost married. I mean, they're married to women, but they're not married to women because ultimately all of them are married to Mother Russia. That's the grandiose image, and that's what actually Putin as a leader portrays. He has no wife. We have no idea whether he has a girlfriend. There are rumors that there is, that she's now a wife, whatnot. I don't really deal with rumors, so I'm not going to comment on that. But he divorced his wife. So women, as physical entities, are the ones who carry the country forward. But the men are those mythological figures that are married to Mother Russia in the Kremlin.
Very, very interesting. And of course that informs policy. That is not just psychological backwater stuff. That is deeply involved in how policy is formed and what happens from it. So take that and to the next step, which is, as you may have imagined, I was going to ask you, Ukraine. Are we tell me we're not entering the Cold War again. Oh, please.
Well, I mean, we are in a very, very frozen peace. That's a given. I mean, it may not be a Cold War, and I am somewhat optimistic. Not that I am optimistic, but I'm somewhat positive about the current ceasefire agreement because Putin has achieved his objective. As far as I see, that is, he basically created a frozen conflict in that part. He makes it very difficult for Ukraine to deal with the East Ukraine area. He actually put all responsibility successfuly on that's very judo. I mean, he found weaknesses of various countries and various administrations. He really used it to his own advantage. So I don't think that that conflict would, unless something horrible happens, like MH17 plane again will be shot down or something like that. So those thugs who are running East Ukraine at this point do something stupid. But other than that, I think it's going to be those do-si-do, sort of this dance between Ukraine and the West and Russia, trying to figure out how to make it politically viable. Whether it will turn further worse in terms of politics or better, we cannot know. I think Putin, and I continue to insist on this, he does not want to be a world pariah. He wanted to prove to the world that the world should be scared of him because of those who married to Mother Russia. They don't believe in respect unless it's fear. So he had to bring that respect through fear, but he still wants to be the world partner, as scary as he may be, not a world pariah. If you step out of whatever my policies are, I'm going to do that judo move, and you don't even notice from which way I'm going to come in. And he really has proved that he can do it. So we are in a very frozen peace right now, which can turn into Cold War easily, because they're already doing the nuclear threat.
I know.
Sort of almost matter-of-factly.
Nina, here's a crazy question, but it's important to me, and I think many of my listeners. One of the, even when I was critical of the Soviet Union and many of its policies, and one of the things that I could always, at least I always felt I could praise, was that it was a deeply secular state. And he has made a new, very strong rapprochement with the Russian Orthodox Church. Is that part of the Mother Russia image? Is that cynical or serious on his part? What do you think?
Well, it's part of the Mother Russia image. And in some ways, I mean, yes, Soviet Union was atheistic, but one of the things about Russia in general is that it's filled with faith, and so communist faith was that religion that the Russians had at the time.
I see.
You can say it doesn't have the Holy Trinity in it, but it had the Communist Party in it, and they had this all-knowing leader in it. So in some ways it's not entirely different, because Russian Christianity or Russian Orthodox Christianity believes in communalism. So you have the patriarch, and then everybody else is serving that incredible commune of the special spiritual nation that Christian Orthodoxy claims. In communism, it was communist. So it's the same, the root of the word is the same. It's the communal, it's the communist and whatnot. So now they're going back to the Tsars. But what I've always maintained is that the Soviet system was not entirely so different from the Tsarist system. It was just organized a little differently.
I see. Fascinating. Every time I speak with you, I learn so much. Thank you for the work you do, and thanks for being with us again today on Women's Media Center Live.
Thank you, Robin, very much.
And now it's time for the Surrealism Corner. Some days I have a case of the sillies, and this is one of them. And that's, after all, what the Surrealism Corner is for. This is a story that you can locate by Googling smuggle, turtle, Spain, and sandwich together. You have to put smuggle in there, otherwise you get an actual recipe for a turtle meat sandwich, which you do not want to have. So, but what the actual story is, that a man had a pet turtle of whom he was very fond, a Spanish man, and he tried to smuggle the turtle onto a plane for a trip that he was taking, and he disguised the turtle as a sandwich. The turtle had pulled in all of its little feet and its head, and he tucked some lettuce and tomato and cheese under the shell and around the edges, and it sort of looked like a Big Mac. I don't know what he was thinking. It didn't really look like a Big Mac at all. And of course they found him trying to board the plane with his turtle with tomato on its head, because the little turtle began to get constricted and put its legs out and waggled its little feet. So the sandwich was alive and the lettuce and tomato were moving. There is a photograph of this on the web that is to die from. It's very funny, except that the turtle is robbed of its dignity, which is not a good thing at all. Turtles are among the oldest species living on the planet, and they should not have lettuce and tomatoes put on their heads, even in order to be taken with on a trip. So the turtle was confiscated, but they said it would be taken care of, and they would put it in a turtle home or pound or something until he returned. So the story has a happy ending. But if you want to see a frustrated amphibian being masqueraded as a Big Mac, Google smuggled turtle Spain sandwich, and up it will come. I apologize for having the sillies today, but this is a photograph that you just can't miss. And the news is bad enough to once in a while, in the surrealism corner, have the acute sillies. Time for another short pause here at Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and we'll be back in just a minute with a woman who captivated the entire country as she stood there in her pink running shoes, insisting on women's right to reproductive freedom, and filibustered for that right. We'll be back in just a minute with Wendy Davis.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again. Wendy Davis, now running for governor of Texas, has become a national figure. But that was not always the case. She was raised by a single mom, not a wealthy background at all, and there's been a lot of personal tragedy in her life. But as a Texas state senator, she made headlines and made trouble of the best sort on behalf of women's reproductive rights. Now she's written a very personal memoir, and she's here today to talk about that and the race and the pink running shoes. Wendy Davis. Wendy, welcome to the program. Glad to have you here.
Thank you. Thank you, Robin. Happy to be with you.
Well, I have to tell you, this book, this memoir, Forgetting to Be Afraid, is really very unusual for a politician to have written. It's honesty, it's vulnerability, it's humor, it's truth. It really is remarkable, and it's the span of a whole bunch of things. I thought I'd die laughing over the catheter story when you were when you were filibustering, and that the catheter was the wrong size urine bag, and you were afraid you'd be on the floor of the Senate with the bag down around your ankles. I mean, only
exactly.
Only a woman would tell this story. Did handlers tell you that you shouldn't be this honest?
You know, I wrote this as a personal memoir, and I didn't allow my political team to intrude. I wanted to write a story that I hoped would be an inspiration for other people. My journey is one that was not uncommon for so many people who start from a place of struggle and who find themselves with greater opportunity because of the power of education. I hoped that in my triumphs and in my sorrows, people would see something that would be helpful to them.
Well, I can't imagine that they won't, because you take the whole, there's a sort of epic American story going down here too, of grandparents and parents on both sides who, folks who were tenant farmers and worked in the textile mills and were barbers and raised pigs and then there comes this amazing moment. You were 18 and pregnant yourself. You were raised largely by a single mom with a magical father, but one who came and went. And then there's this moment when you seem to sort of take the leap into education, knowing that it's the way out, and when you apply to law school, and the magic moment where you get accepted at the dream place at Harvard. I have to tell you, I teared up reading it.
Thank you. It was an amazing journey for me to get to that place. I was a young single mom, and I was working a full-time job and a part-time job. And like so many people in our country today, I was doing everything I could and still it wasn't enough.
Mm-hmm.
I still was rationing food. I still was coming home to my lights being turned off. And I knew that if I couldn't put my foot forward on the path of education, there was going to be no way out of that situation for us. And I was grateful to grow up in a state where my state believed in investing in me. I had state affordable tuition at my community college where I started, and then a state grant that helped me make my way at TCU, and to ultimately find myself standing that day on my front porch looking at the big envelope from Harvard Law School was a culmination of a great deal of struggle and work, and it was one of the most important days of my life, as you can imagine.
It is such a moving moment. It's amazing. And then there's this another transformative moment where you're in school, but you're also working at an HIV/AIDS legal services place, and that seems to really have a profound effect on your realization of just how meaningful and deep and life-changing public service can be and needs to be. Talk a little about that.
Yes, this was back in the early 90s when a diagnosis of HIV or AIDS was essentially the equivalent of a death sentence.
Right.
And I struggled on behalf of people and watched them struggle tremendously with no rights to declare their desires legally with respect to their partners that they were, leaving behind and hoping to entrust their valuables with, their decisions about what they wanted to happen as part of their funeral processes. None of this was respected in the law. And I tried as hard as I could to provide a place of dignity for people who are experiencing that pain. And it really brought home for me the power of voice in the process, and that standing for others and giving voice to them was tremendously important and humbling.
Mm-hmm. What's especially interesting to me is that you've been there. You've been in these positions. At one point your mom was so poor and in such despair that she put you and your siblings in the trunk of the car and was considering very seriously turning on the car in a closed garage until a neighbor intervened. I mean, this is the kind of it's a strange way to say it, but it's the kind of preparation for public office I wish more people had. Not necessarily that anecdote, but when you fight for women's reproductive rights and the right to terminate a pregnancy that is, for various reasons, unapplicable, unwanted, or medically necessary, you've been there. You know what women go through, and maybe it's that informs the passion. Is it?
What informs my passion, of course, is a culmination of my life experiences. I talk in the book about a class that I took called the Warren Court when I was in law school, where our professor asked us to consider not just the case law, mm-hmm. but to consider the people, the 9 Anglo men who were on the Warren Supreme Court who decided the case of Brown versus Board, that important desegregation case. Who were these people, and
right.
what were their life experiences that formed their ability to do this? My experiences have formed my fight, mm-hmm. whether it is my fight for public education. A bill that I first filibustered in 2011 was to try to stop $5.5 billion in cuts to our public schools. Whether it's my fight to make sure that we have more financial assistance for young people who want to go to college to be able to do it. Right. My fight in the consumer arena, against the big boys and the insurance companies and the payday lenders and the electricity arena, because I know from being poor, I know the struggle that a difference of $10 on my electricity bill can mm-hmm. make, or the fact that insurance costs can price, folks out of the ability to own a home. These are things we're fighting for, and people need to know but they've got real people there representing them who have come through life experiences that have shaped them, and that they haven't forgotten what shaped them and why they're there, and what the power of their voice can be if they bring all of that present and forward into the public realm.
I have two more little questions at the end, but I've asked them of women all around the world, and I've had some remarkable answers. As you look back on where you've come from so far, what would you say is your greatest either regret or sadness? And what would you say is your greatest pride or delight or joy? You can take a minute.
My greatest sadness was having to confront the decision to say goodbye to a much wanted, much loved baby girl. My daughter, Ellis, who my former husband and I discovered was suffering a severe brain abnormality. Of course, I write about this, making this very difficult decision about terminating our pregnancy and doing what we believed was in the most loving and best interest of our child, who would have likely not survived to term according to the 4 different medical opinions that we sought. And if she did, would likely have suffered a life experience of being in a permanent vegetative state.
Oh, God. We
couldn't bear that suffering for our daughter. And we made that very difficult decision. It is my greatest sorrow. And it's one, of course, that I carry deep in my heart every day. My greatest joy, I would say, has come from not only seeing my 2 young daughters travel down a path that led them successfully to happy lives, but to watch them do that through education, forging the way, becoming that first-generation college graduate, and creating a path for them. And it's what forms my fight for education and forms my fight to make sure that every child who is willing to work hard has a state that will partner with them to make their dreams come true.
Oh, that's very moving. Well, the book is called Forgetting to Be Afraid. It's a memoir by State Senator Wendy Davis of Texas, who is running for governor of the state. And I would add that I would be glad to extend an invitation to the Republican opponent, Greg Abbott. I would love to have him on the show so he could tell me why he has said he wouldn't sign a bill making it easier for women to sue over pay discrimination, and why he disagrees on the position of the right to terminate a pregnancy and birth control and stuff. So I extend that invitation, but I'm very grateful to you for being with us. I wish you all possible good luck in every endeavor in your life, and thank you, Wendy, for this book and what you do for women, for your constituents, and for people.
Thank you so very much, Robin.
And before we continue, let's take a glance at some news you can use. Cheers to CBS. Kudos. The network is launching the first all-female sports talk show in American history. It's going to be a weekly program. It'll run on CBS Sports Network starting in September, and it will feature an all-female cast and be produced and directed by women. Maybe that show will have a different take on the testosterone-fueled NFL. The other item is about older women. Women may consistently register and vote in higher percentages than men, but 22 million of us who were eligible to vote sat out the November 2010 midterm election. That's not good. So that is why OWL, Older Women's League, together with the Sewell Belmont House and Museum in D.C., is launching a campaign to encourage these women to vote and turn out that vote. You can find out more by going to OWL, OWL-national.org, or by Googling National Older Women's League and get involved, either because you're an older woman yourself or because you want to help an older woman get to the polls and motivate her not to stay home. Her vote counts. And now it's time for one last short break here at Women's Media Center Live, where I am still, well, let me check. Wait a minute. Am I? Yeah, I'm still Robin Morgan. And what's more, Fighting Words is coming up. So stay with us.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
And we're back again, just in time for Fighting Words. So who are these young men? These batterers? There are modern-day gladiators. Many are from disadvantaged backgrounds. There are many of them poorly educated. They suddenly hit fame and glamour, lots of money. They're spoiled, anything they can have, and tremendous pressure to perform. But basically, they're gladiators. They're there for the amusement of the crowd. And eventually the owners abandon them, broken, broke, and brain damaged. So the blame should be put where the blame properly should fall. The rest of Fighting Words this week will be excerpts from a poem I wrote years ago called Battery. The fist meets the face as the stone meets water. I want to understand the stone's parabola and where the ripples disappear, to make the connections, to trace the withholding of love as the ultimate violence. The beating of the words against the poem, to hit, slap, strike, punch, slash, stamp, pound, maul, pummel, hammer, bludgeon, batter, to hurt, to wound, to flex the fist and clench the jaw, and withhold love. The danger in making the connections is to lose the focus. And this is not a poem about official torture in Iran or Chile or the Gulag, or a poem about a bald eagle flailing its wings as it dies, shot down over Long Island. This is a poem called Battery, about a specific woman who is 12 going on 73, and who exists in any unit, grouping, class to serve a common end. A woman who is black and white and bruised all over the world, and has no other place to go, while the Rolling Stones demand shelter, and some cops say it's her own fault for living with him, and some feminists say it's her own fault for living with him, and she hides her dark red velvet wounds from pride, the pride of the victim, the pride of the victim at not being the perpetrator, the pride of the victim at not knowing how to withhold love. The collaboration, the responsibility, the intimate violence, the fantasy, the psychic battery, the lies, the beating of the heart. To fear, to dread, to cower, cringe, flinch, shudder, to skulk, to shuffle. Batter my heart, seven-petaled word, for you as yet but flower inside my brain, that I may understand the stone's parabola, make the connections, remember the focus, comprehend the definitions, and withhold nothing. That's it for today. Don't miss next week's rather spectacular show, when we'll talk with Muna Ghanem of the Syrian Women's Forum for Peace about a new initiative for peace of women from every faction and sect in Syria, and what the rest of us can do to support it. And then, a first for WMC Live, I'm going to debut a roster of correspondents this season, starting with multiple Emmy winner Pat Mitchell, who will be our senior correspondent at large, joining us regularly from all over the world with reports and with exclusive interviews. She starts next week, coming to us from the Omega Institute annual conference, discussing how men can support women's global revolution and save themselves into the bargain. Pat will be talking with, wait for it, Ted Turner. Meanwhile, be sure to visit us at WMCLive.com for the archive of all our previous episodes, and look for us on Facebook, Twitter, and at iTunes worldwide, where you can stream, download, and subscribe to the show's podcast. Portions of this program were taped earlier. Views expressed here do not necessarily represent the WMC. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. WMC President and Executive Producer of this program, Julie Burton. Senior Producer, Crystal Williams-Chancellor, and our founding sponsor, Regina K. Scully. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. See you next week with Muna Ghanem, Pat Mitchell, and Ted Turner, only here on Women's Media Center Live.
For the smartest talk about news, politics, sex, books, religion, race, and more, tune your radio to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan. Audacious, witty, provocative, informative, and fun. It's Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan on WMCLive.com. Talk radio with a brain.